Last month we went to Bots and Brews. It was at Riverlands Brewery, thus the name. We took our robot Bigfoot. The arena they had there was the most sophisticated that we've ever fought in. It had hammers and steel floor and a pneumatic pit. The field of bots there was pretty stellar for it being a relatively small event. It had some of the best bots in the Midwest. And after our event 2 weeks ago being less than stellar, I was feeling pretty anxious and wanting to get some wins that weekend. And plus, look at these trophies. I absolutely had to leave with one of these trophies. I'd be really disappointed if I didn't. So I was going to try my best. Let's see how I did. Our first fight was against Separation Anxiety. Based on their performance at previous events, we were feeling pretty confident going into it. And as you can see, since they're a horizontal spinner that's pretty high up in the air, it's very difficult for their weapon to hit us. And with their wedge and lack of forks, we're able to get underneath them pretty easily. Let me take this time to apologize for the video quality. Since it was outside, we couldn't record ourselves because we'd just see the reflection of ourselves. So we kind of had to rely on the event organizers. So this is what we ended up getting. Yeah, unfortunately, it's hard to tell what's going on in that corner. I know we end up flipping them upside down at some point. I think that happened earlier. And we end up losing a tire right there. Luckily, we can run just fine with 3. They're actually more dangerous while upside down. Because obviously they got that tire. And throughout the fight, they actually ended up bending the forks enough. We ended up replacing them. But other than that, they can't really drive super well upside down. So we're feeling pretty confident. I'm just trying to be careful not to make mistakes. Here they end up getting stuck on the corner of the arena and they end up getting tapped out. So that ends up being a knockout for us. So our second fight was against Death by 1,000 Forks. Unfortunately, I don't have footage for this fight because, like I said before, we were relying on the event organizers for footage. And they didn't post that for some reason. But we started out pretty strong since Death by 1,000 Forks is a wedge bot. If we can control the match, then we can win. But unfortunately, wheel came off, which was fine. One wheel, losing one wheel. We can keep trucking just fine until the second wheel came off for no reason. Keep in mind, it's a wedge bot, so the wheel just decided it didn't want to be part of the rest of the robot. And then around this time, they start being able to get underneath us because we can't maneuver quite as quickly because there's a little bit of friction there now. And then the third wheel came off. And at this point, I just realized I guess I'll lose. And then the fourth wheel came off and then I got counted out. So we ended up getting knocked out that round. And usually we use this glue on a roll to keep the wheels on because they're just sort of press fit on there so there can be semi-ablative. But after that fight, I said screw it and decided to super glue them because I did not want to lose another fight like that. Our third fight is against Slam. They've been a pretty consistently good bot, being in the top 10 all season. So we're pretty intimidated going into this one. They've even knocked us out before, but we'll see how this goes. A little awkward start with us getting stuck on the seam a couple times. Kind of able to get out of their grip. We end up locking horns for a really long period of time here, to the point that our motors really don't like it. And you'll see right here, all but like one motor is working. And I don't know if it was the hit or what, or if it just needed a second, but then we're working just fine the rest of the fight. We're able to get a few pins here, but we're not quite able to flip them over yet. Here we're feeling real good with this pin. We end up getting out of that because they get stuck on that seam. We end up flipping them over. This is real good for us. Makes them really hard for them to hit us, and they can't drive nearly as well. And we pretty much win the ground game at this point. Although apparently we can't quite push them with them on top of us. Here they basically get stuck on the side of the arena. Their bot actually completely shuts down, and they end up getting counted out with just a couple seconds left on the clock, giving us one more knockout up for the day. Let me talk about the tournament format for a second, since it's kind of relevant to our odds of getting a trophy. Since they had a limited amount of time, they decided to do standard Swiss, meaning that every bot gets 4 fights, and then they're going to determine the place, the first, second, and third, based on how well they do in those 4 fights. And with the only exception being if there's a tie, they'll do a tiebreaker. And keep in mind that the weight for knockouts is 100-0, while the weight for judges' decisions is 70-30. So because we got knocked out in the second round, pretty much our only chance of possibly getting third and walking home with a trophy is if we get a knockout in this last fight. And even still, it's not guaranteed. So let's see how that went. Our 4th fight was against Lil Pacino. We fought them in the past, and we're feeling pretty confident going into this one. It was just a matter of whether or not we can get that knockout. Get stuck on that lip and turn myself around for some reason. Able to consistently get underneath them, and they're just sort of bouncing all over the place. Get a nice pin. And then right here, when they're on their back, I'm able to prevent them from being able to gyrate off their back long enough for them to end up getting stuck there. And they end up getting counted out, so that ends up being a 3rd knockout for us for the day. So we've done all we can at this point to have our best chance at getting on the podium. We've been sweating all day in the hot sun. I end up getting a huge gash on my head from hitting the awning of the Waffle Dia truck. And just as we're about to start packing up, that's when we get the announcement. Bigfoot and T-Pose need to fight a tiebreaker for 3rd. So I was real excited about this fight, not just because it meant I have a chance for 3rd, but I also get to use that wedge configuration I added to version 3 and haven't got to use yet. So we start the fight kind of after the bell rings. This first exchange is pretty big. Pretty much any time they're upside down, that means they can't hit us, so that's good. Even with the wedge configuration, we still get stuck on that lip. For pretty much the first minute, neither of us is really able to gain the advantage on the other, with them not being able to do any damage to us and us not being able to quite pin them down. But you'll see when the tides turn. So this happens a couple times during this fight where we can't quite see what's going on. And then we push him into the corner. Alyssa is able to hit the hammer at the perfect time. This actually takes out his drive motor, which is super good for us, because now we're able to actually pin him, which is pretty much the whole strategy. So we're doing pretty good. Feeling good at this point. He's down to drive side. Yeah. But here's when he goes to his own corner with his hammer and tries to do some percussive maintenance. I kind of just let him do it because I don't want to get hit by the hammer himself or myself. And the crazy part is it seems to work. Or maybe that's just the gyration of him. And here ends up taking a wheel, but it doesn't really matter because we can drive just fine on 3 wheels. And it ends up going to judge's decision. Not much happens in the last few seconds. Before I get into the result of the judge's decision, I want to talk about how well the wedge configuration ended up working. As expected, the heads on a bunch of the button head screws ended up getting sheared off, but luckily the one side was able to stay on just fine even with one screw left. Also, I was worried about the weapon catching the lip on the plate, but luckily it seems like when it got hit that it just chunked it instead of taking the whole plate with it. So all in all, I feel pretty good about how this configuration works. So, the result of the judge's decision. As you can see, we ended up winning it and getting third. It's good to see Bigfoot finally performing as well as I know it can, especially with the new version. I knew then there seems like the upgrades I made are really paying off, and we're performing as pretty much as well as we can, except for that one fight, which apparently there's no record of, so it didn't happen. But I'm going to be focusing on my beetle weight up until we get closer to finals. And before you ask, yes, it does spin. So be sure, if you like this video, be sure to like below, and thanks for watching.